I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Yeah, what's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like live right here on Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball, and joining me right off the break, Dr. Todd Stephen Burrows. You all know what it is. Longtime journalist, researcher, professor, author, drums at theglobalvillage.com. And here with us again. What's up, my man? Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Ball. Good morning, Black Power Media audience. It is time to talk pop culture again, Dr. Ball. And I just want to say, every day I try to get up and be a disciplined Black writer and trying to be an African. And my latest challenge is to get up every day and to not go see Spider-Man No Way Home for the third time, right? And so every day I get up and I don't see that movie for the third time, I feel like a very disciplined African.
So you sent me some notes.
I did.
And one of them involves that film, thoughts
Right.
about that film, because I know the passing of Sidney Poitier is the main purpose of our discussion, but there is a
Right.
context.
Right.
That I know we wanted to build. And just so everybody knows, first of all, good morning to everybody. Good morning to everybody who's here live, all the remixers, everybody who will see this later or hear it on wherever your favorite podcast is. Welcome. And just so we're all clear, at 9 o'clock, we're going to jump and do a whole separate live stream. So just in case there's any confusion, we will be asking people to go to the other link for, or at least I will, for a discussion of the book Bitcoin in Black America. I wanted to set them up to be entirely separate, and since we knew what was happening today, I went ahead and did it that way. So just so everybody's clear what's going on.
And I love how you've now become like the expert hammer, right? You've been welding Monier, right? The black Monier, right? On this Bitcoin thing, you've been on it all the way.
Well, it's yeah. And reading this book, I mean, there's just it feels a little lonely, but I get why, and we'll get into all of that there. It's the
trend. It's the trend. So, being that I mentioned Spider-Man No Way Home because I want to talk about Shark Tank as well.
I got all of your notes. I got everything. Yeah. So whenever you want to pull them up, I'm all set. Let me know where you want to start. But
I'm going to start with Spider-Man No Way Home and then go to Shark Tank and then jump back. Because I thought Shark Tank over the weekend on Friday was significant as well. But first, let me start with Spider-Man No Way Home because I really, really have to shout out this amazing article in Counterpunch by Andrew Stewart. Andrew Stewart is a white, I believe he's a white imperialist, anti-imperialist writer. And he wrote this amazing piece about Spider-Man and othering and being outed and, how Spider-Man is so symbolic of so much of the problems that, LGBT people and people who are others deal with. It's an amazing piece and Counterpunch.
So by outing, is this because this I'm assuming, because I haven't seen the new Spider-Man because I'm not going to a movie theater. I don't care about it that much.
Right. No, that's the article right there.
But I've seen more than I'd like to admit video assessments of the film.
Right.
And I've not seen this particular argument, but I'm assuming the outing and apparently even the reference to doxing is about Peter Parker having been outed as Spider-Man,
Absolutely.
and the ramifications in multiple universes that this
Absolutely.
outing. So Stewart here is then saying what then
He
about
is
what else
saying
is
that Spider-Man and Peter Parker is representative of the alienation of people who are the other. And he goes deep into his own background and how he's been ostracized by his family and for the orientation he has. And he goes really deep into what the Marvel characters mean in terms of these characters as outsiders who are against the state, which is important to me, I think, because we have to deal with the fact that because comic books have been mischaracterized as like modern day mythology. Like that's really not correct. Mythology, as we know, Dr. Ball, is just discarded religion, right? When people adopt a new religion, their old religion becomes mythology, right? Well, we're not talking about mythology. What we're talking about when we talk about these superhero characters is we're talking about modern day folklore. Now, in terms of superheroes, these are hegemonic, right? They are folklore designed to sell magazines and to sell toys and to sell cartoons. I mean, they're there to sell, and these characters are definitely designed for that. But they also touch something deep inside in terms of, and particularly these Marvel characters, touch something deep inside the human psyche that people respond to, and that's from the very beginning, particularly with this character. So I wanted to point out this article for the Black Power Media audience because I think it's a very serious article about popular culture and why we need to treat popular culture seriously and why we need to show the symbols of resistance and hegemony that are in these characters, that are in these stories, so that we can better explain our society.
So wait a minute, because I admit I didn't. I'll put the link to this in the show notes.
Sure.
I don't think I did this already, but and I haven't seen the film, and I did not read this article closely enough. But are you saying that Stewart is arguing that Spider-Man, that the film includes anti-imperialist or at least or some sort of radical messaging?
Stewart is talking about Spider-Man as an outsider, as someone who is ostracized by, for instance, the media, attacked by the media, criticized by the police, and also, how he goes through life, how Peter Parker goes through life, and how he doesn't have the trappings of a Bruce Wayne, who Batman may be messed up in the head, but he's still a rich billionaire and playboy philanthropist, right? To use a famous Robert Downey Jr. line in the Avengers. Spider-Man is different. The X-Men are different. They are people who are ostracized, who are constantly attacked. I mean, every conspiracy that we talk about has been played out in the X-Men comic over the last 40 years, whether it's destructive virus, people being targeted as groups trying to be, genocidal activity. Like all of this has been played out.
Even vaccine mandates.
I'm sorry?
Even vaccine mandates.
Right.
In trying to make them take the anti.
Absolutely.
What is it? The anti-mutant vaccine.
Right. So this article does a much better job than I'm really not doing this article justice, but it does a much better job of explaining that and explaining that in the context of imperialism and in the context of hegemony. So I really hope that you guys check it out.
I will look at it, but I already know. Remember, my bias is always going to be the Vernon philosophy of Black media avoidance that should be applied probably to any group that sees itself as an outsider or is marginalized. So I don't think LGBTQ folks or anyone else should be looking for their story in this, because I haven't seen this one, but I've seen all the other ones, and I've read the comic, and I used to even collect as a kid briefly. But what is ultimately, first of all, Peter Parker does have the ability to escape into a white middle class, if not maybe lower middle class, male, heteronormative world if he wants to, up until he's outed as Spider-Man. So I guess that's the part I'm not caught up on.
Right. And I think that's the part that Stewart emphasizes, right?
Okay.
Right.
But his goals are also to be part of this society. He's not an anti-imperialist.
Because you haven't seen the movie, I can't really comment, but I'll just say
up until maybe he went through. Okay, all right, fair enough.
The movie ends in a way that is. I'll just put it this way: the movie ends in a way that's very familiar to those of us who grew up on the comic. I'll just say that.
But then that confirms my point. Not to spoil for what I haven't even seen, but anyway, all right. Anyway, I know you don't want to spoil. I don't want to spoil it. I want to guide people to this Andrew Stewart article, but I definitely don't want to spoil it to the 5. All right, I'm gonna read the article, and I'm gonna and when the movie comes out on streaming platforms, I'll watch it. And then we'll have a part 2 on that conversation.
We'll have a part 2 on that conversation, and I'll definitely be excited for that part 2. Now, let's talk about Shark Tank. Now, all right. Now I know it's a funny topic for an anti-imperialist network. Let's talk about the show devoted to capitalism.
Well, the whole thing is just a bunch of contradictions and confusion. Like when I looked at this, this whole thing is going to require. And again, from my point of view, I don't know exactly how Dr. Burroughs is doing this, but from my point of view, all of this leads perfectly to where we are centering eventually a discussion of Poitier.
Well,
to me,
yes,
all of this. I don't know if you were doing this intentionally.
Right. No, I'll tell you my journey to watching Shark Tank. It was my first time watching it all the way through. My oldest nephew is a filmmaker, Andrew Burroughs Jr. He's a filmmaker. And just like I'm an unabashed, I don't know what you want to call myself, broad-based socialist or broad-based leftist, whatever. He is an unabashed capitalist. Like he is a Jay-Z capitalist, right? That album came out and he was reciting that lyric that we all know, right? So he had been dogging me out for months over, well, you're so radical, you're so African-centered, but you don't know about Blacksands, and this guy's making all this money. And I'm like, no, I don't know about Blacksands, right? So he kept dogging me out about it, and then he showed me that the guy who created Blacksands was going to be on Shark Tank. I said, okay, fine. And so I finally looked up this guy, and I watched Shark Tank. And it's the first time me watching it all the way through.
And this is the team here, right?
Yeah, that's their team, right? That's the dude is in the center. He is the co-CEO with his wife, which is to my right. And this third guy who's like the animator, like he's a professional animator from Pixar or whatever, who joined up with this crew. Now, this guy has made 6 figures in terms of independent comic sales for the past 2 or 3 years or so.
You know why you can't tell it to everybody?
My bad.
You want to kill a big dream.
I didn't want to play the audio from that because I can't stand the message or the what's his name? Steve Harvey commentary on it.
Right. What was Kevin Hart actually in terms of
No, the commentary here is Steve Harvey on this.
Steve Harvey?
This IG clip.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying that's from their page. I was just trying to this is their work. I was trying to show at least some of the work they were doing while you were talking.
I didn't know Steve Harvey was involved. I'm sorry, Black Power Media audience, that we're talking about Steve Harvey.
Yeah, his voice, he runs, and it's on here. And it's basically a clip of him saying, "Don't share your good ideas with people who might not support them,
right? Because
God gave you the idea, not them,
right."
So that's me giving the message for Steve. That's Steve Harvey's message.
Yeah,
my bad. Go ahead.
I'm sorry that we've talked about Steve Harvey here. So I looked at his page, and his tweets and everything were kind of hinting that some really good news was going to happen at this Shark Tank. So I watched Shark Tank, enjoyed it, and I basically watched him cut a deal with both Kevin Hart and Mark Cuban. Mm-hmm. Now, I had some interesting flashbacks because when Kevin Hart was saying, well, I have all the infrastructure for you, it reminded me of what happened with Milestone Comics. Milestone Comics, to go back a little bit, was Marvel acted like assholes to people in the early 90s, right? They were literally telling artists who were selling hundreds of thousands of books that they were not selling the books. That it was really the characters selling the books. Yes. And so a group of white artists told Marvel, fuck you. And these white guys and this Asian guy named Jim Lee, who went with the white guys, they formed something called Image Comics. And Image Comics is known largely now for Todd McFarlane's character Spawn, and for it was the original comic place for The Walking Dead, right? It's how The Walking Dead became a comic book. The group of black artists that Marvel dogged out formed something called Milestone Comics. And they went to a Jewish white liberal, who's head of DC, Paul Levitz, I think that's how you pronounce his name. And he said, I'm going to help you. You're going to be able to use our printers. I'm going to give you a headquarters. And I want you to produce these black superheroes. He said, but there's one condition. Because it's our printer and because we're backing you, if there's something we don't like, we're going to tell you no. And so these characters came out, Static, Icon, who's a black conservative superhero, Hardware, right? And, they were not revolutionary at all, right? Although the first issue of Hardware, where, the main metaphor of the story was, I let my parakeet out of the cage and my parakeet confused that with being free because he banged him against the window. Yeah, he said, because Hardware is about a black guy who's like a Tony Stark. He's like a black Tony Stark who goes to his white benefactor and mentor and kind of surrogate father and says, I should now have a part of the company. And the white guy goes, well, that's like, he's like the Lex Luthor character. He's like, you want a part of the company? That's like my dog deserves a part of the company.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is in the first issue of Hardware. And so then the guy goes downstairs into the basement of the company and builds an suit of armor like Iron Man, and then goes out to destroy the company. And that's the whole plot of Hardware. Now, the writer of Hardware, Dwayne McDuffie, said that was my relationship with Marvel. He openly said that. Right. So Milestone came out, and there were problems because Milestone wanted to deal with teenage sex and things like that. And DC was saying no. And they had to, they were constantly worrying about what DC thought because DC owned the printer. DC was the imprint. So like many comic book companies of the 90s, they went under. DC wound up buying the characters or leasing the characters. So the characters would still survive in the mainstream universe. And now a group of artists and writers led by Reginald Hudlin is trying to bring Milestone back. But the whole idea of Milestone is compromised. Yeah, Milestone Returns. The whole idea.
So wait a minute. Wait, it's just so I'm clear, because I want to make sure I'm keeping up with everything. What I'm hearing is with Milestone Returns, we're getting the return of a bunch of black conservatives. Is that
Icon is the black conservative superhero? He's Clarence Thomas's favorite comic. Right. Icon is about a black conservative. Icon is about an alien who crash landed on Earth during the slavery era. He converts himself to the first person he sees. So the first person he sees is an African slave woman. So he converts himself into a black guy, and he then goes throughout the entire history of Black America. And he only uses his powers in secret, and he becomes this conservative. Now, this is a guy who's lived through slavery, Reconstruction, the Harlem Renaissance, and he's a black conservative, right? And so, like I said, this is Clarence Thomas's favorite comic. So they're bringing back these characters, different types. Static, like I said, people might remember the cartoon Static Shock. That was one of the Milestone characters. They're bringing back these characters, but again, they're having the same problems because it's completely dependent on DC. Now, I bring that up because what Kevin Hart told this guy was, look, I have the, you want to do animation. Like the goal from the guy from Blacksands is to do animation, right? He can't afford to do the animation. Kevin Hart says, I have the entire infrastructure. I have the writers. I have everything, you need to do this. But, you've got to give me 30%. And so, of course, the guy agreed to the 30%. And, with some editing, the trick editing of reality shows. And looked like he thought about it for a minute or whatever before doing that. But I've not read the content of these comics, so I don't know how radical they are not. And I don't know what Kevin Hart and his writers and Mark Cuban and these folks are going to do to this stuff, since they're going to be the ones funding this and sponsoring this in terms of animation. Now, you remember, Dr. Ball, we talked about a while ago, the Reginald Hudlin Black Panther cartoon, which he did with his own money. And you can tell he did it with his own money. Why? Because it is still to this day probably the most radical, anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist cartoon that has
so much better than the movie. It's so much better than the movie, and it is infuriating that the movie is the version that is more popular. The Reginald Hudlin Black Panther series cartoon, I mean, it's as good as I think you could ever expect to see something. And it is nothing like the movie. I mean, it's just crazy how the whole perspective is very much anyway. So anyway, go ahead.
I just wanted to point that out to the audience that this guy is very big. He's, I don't want to culturally date myself, but he's like the Elin Harris, I guess, of Black comics. Elin Harris was a famous novelist who used to sell his novels out of the trunk of his car, and he sold at the barbershops and beauty salons, and he sold so much of it, he got picked up by major publishers, right? So this guy is in that model. And so we'll see what he comes up with. And, I'm going to check out his comics at some point this year. It's kind of a cultural goal of mine. And I'll see, what he's produced, because he's like the main writer of these characters, these Egyptian characters. So we'll see.
All right. So I find it hard to believe that Kevin Hart is going to take over something that looks to bring back at least one Black conservative character and turn them into revolutionaries. But,
we'll see what goes on. Now, we've got to yield to gravity. As much as I want to talk about, these white celebrities dying so suddenly, Betty White, Bob Saget, I'm just shocked that these white people are just going like this. These are pillars of American society.
Well, Betty White is not a surprise, with all due respect.
Right. She was old when I was a little kid, so I
that's what I'm saying.
I'm going to live forever. I thought the opposite. I think she's going to live forever. Right?
Okay, so with all due respect.
No. And by the way, I see the chat. I did not know that James Mtume is not with us. That is a huge loss.
Oh wow.
Yeah, no, the chat is talking about it.
When did that happen?
I don't know. I see Leah Boggs and other people talking about it. And that's a huge loss. In fact, Mtume is one of the organizers, was one of the organizers now, if I have to get my tenses right, of the National Black Political Convention. He was going to be the radical end, I guess, of the organizers of this National Black Political Convention that is coming up in Newark in late April, early May. So this is a huge loss for many of us in the New York metropolitan area. James Mtume represented financial independence done in the service of radicalism. So for many of us, he represented the person who made money and who turned around and used his platform to push for radical causes. So this is actually a huge loss.
And given all the discussion we've been having here lately, he had joined Karenga's Us organization. I don't think I knew back in '66. Anyway, yeah, that's a shame.
Right. So, but moving on to Sidney Poitier. I mean, Sidney Poitier's bio is very, very well known. There were just 5 things that I thought we could talk about over the next, half hour, 5 things that I want to emphasize. So I'm not saying these 5 things are not talked about. I'm saying that these 5 things are not emphasized or contextualized. So first of all, do you have any comments about Poitier? I mean, I would love to hear your view of this.
I mean, again, not intended to be disrespectful or to generally my approach is to prefer to look at the context that people find themselves in. But I am actually some of the, and I think we're going to get to it. You wanted to talk about some of it, but I think, some of the way he's being remembered is part of what has always bothered me. I'm not in, in other words, I am not so moved by the pioneers into white spaces.
Right.
I'm not as moved by people who do everything or so much behind the scenes as much as I think that that's important. I don't know why I'm always troubled by, you may not have known what he was doing, but this is what he was doing.
Right.
And then even with the Jamie Foxx thing that I went back and looked at, because you sent the link, the role that Poitier was meant to play in keeping Black celebrities in line and being respectful of their, being allowed into these spaces, and then portraying, and I get it. I mean, I feel conflicted in this all the time, but in the, we don't want our people portrayed in the worst of our condition, but at the same time, I'm always bothered by, well, we have to be portrayed in the most bougie or civil, as they would say. So I don't know. I mean, and then, I got a message from Daruba this morning, and I don't know if it's meant to be public, but so I won't read it, but it's essentially, what are we to do with people who ultimately are in support of having us enter this as opposed to ending this. And I think that so if we, and with all respect to everybody, I'm thinking of Daruba closer to the end of his life than the beginning, looking at some of, his own contemporaries and the decisions that they've made and how they've been rewarded and their ideas have been rewarded. And the community, the collective, is worse off, is going backwards. So anyway, I don't know exactly all that to say, I enjoyed some of his films. I understand. I certainly remember even as a kid being inspired by him slapping the cop. That's a big scene. I can't front that even as a kid, that was a big scene when but anyway, let me. I guess that's where I'm at right now.
We need your decolonized skepticism. That's why I wanted you to go first, right? Because we need that decolonized view. Because I agree with you. I mean, the decolonized perspective is dying a very slow death because so many people are getting into the system. See, first you got into the system on white terms, right? Then you got into the system on Black terms. Now you're getting into the system on Afrocentric terms, right? Right? Do you agree with that chronology? What do you think about that chronology?
I don't know if I understand it. Let me let you. In
other words, America and capitalism can expand to fit almost anything.
Oh,
again, I love to talk about Network, right? The Angela Davis character in Network is completely compromised, right? Right? And I mean, and it didn't happen overnight. It slowly happened, right? I mean, because we have to deal with the contradiction of, okay, most of us are not leaving here, right? We have to deal with the contradiction of whether we like it or not, we're citizens here, right? We vote here, we pay taxes here, right?
I mean, right.
And,
Oh, you mean
Newark,
leaving this country? I thought you meant leaving this life,
right?
like you thought Betty White might not ever.
Right. And I mean, in Newark, we've had this argument before. In Newark, we believe that if we're paying taxes here, we should have representatives, and we should fight, right? I mean, we believe in that. We believe in representation, right? So okay, so there's all of these contradictions, right? But America and capitalism will expand to the utmost to fit you in, because fitting you in is so much easier than setting up the state to oppose you. Particularly if they set up the state to oppose you, as we know with the history of the Panthers, if they really set up the state to oppose you, it's going to be very difficult for you to operate. So it's contradiction on top of contradiction on top of contradiction. And within that, we have Sidney Poitier. So let me emphasize these 5 things that I think are important. First of all, Sidney Poitier is from the African American. Well, first he's from the Caribbean experience, and then he's from the African American Harlem experience. And I don't know if this is really emphasized, but I mean, he was formed and shaped by the Negro Ensemble Company and by the movement, which we did not call the Civil Rights Movement in the North. We did not call it that. We called it the Black Freedom Movement or the Freedom Movement, right? And so he's shaped by all these things that are happening around him, and others like Cicely Tyson, Harry Belafonte. All of these people are young people working as actors in Harlem and being shaped by all of these Harlem radical Black nationalist movements and radical socialist and communist movements. Poitier gets discovered because Belafonte is sick one day and Poitier is the understudy. And so he gets discovered, right? And so he gets in these films that are originally, and now sound like Dr. Ball, that are originally quite ridiculous, right? The Defiant Ones, which is supposedly this deep commentary on integration versus segregation, right? James Baldwin talked about how at the end of that film, when Sidney Poitier almost sacrifices himself to pull Tony Curtis up on that train, he said in Harlem, people laughed. They thought that was absolutely ridiculous, right?
And then I'm sorry to jump in here, but remember that our generation got the remake as well with Carl Weathers and the white boy from Spencer for Hire. I can't remember it, right? That was the same guy, right? They even made the film again.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Oh, you did?
No, I didn't know that.
Oh, well, good for
Robert Urich. So Robert Urich and Carl Weathers did that film again.
And I as a child I saw it, and all I remember was I just have this memory of my mother saying, kind of frowning and saying, "But this is a bad knockoff of a something like of an already troubled film." Like it was
right.
Like you're watching the garbage replacement of garbage was basically the point anyway. But
right.
Anyway.
But let's go with that. So Poitier enters into the system. And he's given ridiculous roles, right? I mean, he basically creates the Magic Negro, right? But in this case, the Magic Negro is a star, right? The Magic Negro has actually been demoted in modern times, right? Poitier started out as the Magic Negro being the star of the movie, and then now the Magic Negro is this little kind of supporting character. So, you got Lilies of the Field, where he's helping out the white nuns. And I forgot the film where he's helping out the young white blind girl, right? And I mean, he's winning Oscars and accolades, right, for these movies, right? To the point where even white film critics are starting to go like, okay, this doesn't make any sense. And your people are struggling in all of this, and you're like this white conception of a Negro, and you are promoting this kind of this misreality. This is a white film critics of like the 60s, right? Now the irony is that while he was doing those kinds of films, he was not doing the bullshit they do today. You know, I'm going to give a couple $1,000 to the Urban League. I'm going to give, you know, some money to a scholarship or whatever. Belafonte dragged his ass to Selma and said, we're going to bring this money to SNCC. And Poitier, on Like It Is, again, Like It Is, I'm beginning to be, as I get older, I get more conspiracy theorists. I'm beginning to believe there's a reason that we're not seeing Like It Is over 10 years after Bill Noble's death.
Listen to me, man. People may not realize how much I bother you about coming on here and how reluctant you are. Because every time you come on here, I hear about you should have Todd on more often. I'm like, duh. But I really want you to do. We need like a full-on special on Gil Noble, on Like It Is.
Let's do it. Let's do it next month. I'm there. Let's do it next month. But and let me get back to thank you for offering that, by the way. But let me get back to this because, like I said, as I get older,
I'm demanding it.
I am
begging
seeding
for it.
And I am seeding. No,
anyway,
no,
go ahead.
Yeah.
But
no, but to go back, as I get older, I get more conspiracy theorists because there's got to be some reason that after 10 years or whatever, ABC and the Noble family, whatever, has not worked out something to get Like It Is back on. And the only, back on in terms of being an archive and being on a website so that we can all see it. And the only thing that I'm coming to as I get older and more conspiracy theorists is they just don't want to deal with this content.
Well,
because Noble interviews Poitier at length, and Poitier talks about, we were in the car and the SNCC organizer said to us in the car, okay, I don't want you to be worried, but there's a car in back of us and there's some people in it. And so, you know, we're talking about people who like risk their lives, right? I mean, they could have been killed. They could have been run off the road. I mean, this is the real commitment that people had. So Poitier is literally doing this double consciousness. I mean, in 1967, he comes out with 3 films, right? In the Heat of the Night, that's the film where he plays the black cop from Philly who goes into the South, and you know, that's when he slaps the white guy, right? That's that famous scene.
They call me Mr. Tips,
right? To Serve with Love, right? Where for some reason he feels that his role is to go and teach white working class English students in England, right? This Caribbean brother, right? So he's on the African Revolution happening all over the place, but his place is with the white working class, which could be radical on one way if it was done the right way. Like, you know, had that film been done the right way, it'd have been very interesting. And then the third movie that everybody remembers, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? And I didn't know they made a remake of that, and we're not going to talk about that. But let's talk about
where they reversed the joint.
Right. But let's talk about Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. So Guess Who's Coming to Dinner is about straight up assimilation. They don't even pretend. Now, there's some little lines in it that I'm sure Poitier helped with, where like he's explaining to Spencer Tracy. He's explaining to Spencer Tracy, it's not that we have natural rhythm, it's that it's our dancing, it's our music. He said, you dance the Watusi, but we are the Watusi, right? I mean, little things like that, you know, that I'm sure he slips in, right? But this image is just so completely separate from reality that it's almost less real than Spider-Man No Way Home, right?
Oh, wow.
So he tries to fix that. And that's why I wanted to get to this kind of film that they don't talk about. And you know, Dr. Ball, I always like to talk about these Hollywood films that they don't talk about, right? You know, maybe the audience doesn't know, but you know that once upon a time, there were these funders who wanted to fund a blaxploitation film, and the filmmaker and novelist came to them and said, well, we have a film like that. You know, they lied. They basically lied to these filmmakers. These filmmakers saw violence and things like that and said, oh, yeah, we'll fund this, you know. And that's how we got the movie version of The Spook Who Sat by the Door, right? People were more
wait a minute. I'm not clear on that. You're saying Poitier had something to do with that film being made?
I'm saying that we're talking about this kind of era where people were sneaking things in. And the spook was set by the door was literally snuck in because the filmmakers didn't read the book. They didn't. The funders didn't read the book. They didn't know what they were making, and so that's how the film got made. And that's why the film is an underground classic. Because had they known they were making that film, they wouldn't have made it. Right? That's one film that was snuck in. Right?
Because they knew they were making this one. That's all I like.
It's not coming up any bigger.
Yeah, Piece of the Action.
Yeah, I'm going to get there in a second. I'm going to get there in a second. There's an interesting interlude between Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and then the Bill Cosby, we can call it the Bill Cosby comedy era, right? That starts with Uptown Saturday Night, right? Mm-hmm. There's a film called For the Love of Ivy. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, okay, I've never heard of this Sidney Poitier film. Why have I never heard of this Sidney Poitier film? I've heard of everything else. Why have I not heard of this? So I started watching it. The film is about Abby Lincoln's character, who's a young Black domestic. And she's kind of sheltered, and she's worked with this white couple all of her life, right? And as a domestic. And she meets this Black man, Sidney Poitier. And this Black man is an entrepreneur. He's a hustler. Now, what does he do? He runs these illegal gambling casinos, right? Now, this is the part that kind of shocked me. He took her on a date, and, he showed her the operation. He showed her the casinos, right? Now, all of the patrons are white. And Ivy, the Ivy character goes, oh, I want to get in on this. I want to gamble. And he said, oh, no. He said, we don't steal money from blood. Right. Now, that was the reaction I had. The reaction you're having is the reaction I had. I said, whoa. And, when I hear things like that, I go, what year was this movie made? And then I go look it up. So it's like, 68, 69? See, they were slipping stuff in. Guess who was one of the writers? Sidney Poitier. So it turns out that this illegal casino thing is a way to bilk the white people and make some money, right? And so the whole movie is about that Ivy realizes that I've got to be independent. And so my first step toward independence is to leave this white family. And the white family represents the white liberals. Oh, we love you so much. Oh, we're losing you, and they were just very upset. And she just had to stand up for herself to leave and to go be Black. And I thought that was a very interesting film. I said, this is a very interesting film. But when I saw that scene about, we've set up this economic system to steal from the white capitalists, I was like, that's why I've never heard of this movie. And it's also like, my favorite blaxploitation movie of all time. I know the Black Power media audience knows about this. A film called Superfly TNT. Everyone talks about Shaft and the movie Shaft in Africa, which is a James Bond film, right? That's all Shaft in Africa is.
Oh, wow.
But nobody talks about this film, Superfly TNT. And I'm like, why don't, because I had never heard of the film. I hadn't seen the film. And, I'd never seen the film. I'd never heard of the film in like 20, 30 years or whatever. And I finally watched it and I realized why I had never heard of this film. It's the direct sequel to Superfly that they never talk about. Why? Because what's the plot?
I honestly don't remember. I'm looking at it now.
Some Black revolutionaries come to Superfly, come to Priest, and say, we know you're out of the game. Because remember, Priest leaves the game at the end of the first Superfly. He leaves the game. Some African revolutionaries come to Priest and say, we need your help running guns to African revolutionaries in our country so that we can go up against the white minority government. That's the plot of Superfly.
And he agrees to this?
Yes, he agrees to it and goes.
Because in the first movie, he disses the brother that tries to approach him for help. The brother comes in with the red, black, and green kufi.
Right.
And he disses him.
Well, yeah, no.
So that's interesting.
He reluctantly goes. It takes a while for him to go. Right. I agree with that. It takes a while for him to go. But he does go.
Wow.
And he does run the guns, and they do fight the white minority government. Now, what's really funny is, because again, I saw this movie, and again, I go with my pattern. Okay, what year was it made? And I look it up, and it's made in 72 or whatever. And I looked at the screenwriter, and I did a double take. Because who's the screenwriter of Superfly TNT? Some black guy we had never heard of named Alex Haley.
Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah, that's
it takes a minute, right? It takes a minute to absorb that, right?
Yeah.
So to go back to Sidney Poitier, this is a period where people are trying to sneak things in. They're trying to test the boundaries, because remember, the Hollywood studio system is falling apart in that late 60s, early 70s. So they're letting the young white radicals in who are doing Easy Rider and stuff like that. And this is where we get Coppola and George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. They're the young white hippies who come in to save Hollywood, right? But they save Hollywood after these other young white radicals come in. They start doing films about the society, like Serpico and like Robert Redford's films, right? The Candidate, All the President's Men. These are all these films about society, right? Which is okay, but then Jaws comes along, Star Wars comes along, and then it goes back to normal. Okay, now we're back to not having information, not having context, not having politics in the film. Because I never forgot how I never forgot about how what's the name of that film? 3 Days of the Condor ends, right? Because 3 Days of the Condor, that's the film about they're trying to kill the CIA agent because he found out this link to the oil, right? And got to kill him. And remember the CIA agent says, "Well, I just told everything to the New York Times." And then the CIA, and then the other guy says, "But will they print it?" And then they walk away, and we don't know. Like, we don't even know whether they print it or not, right? We don't know. And see, that kind of critical assessment, right, is very difficult to get now, right? So anyway, to go back to Sidney, so he does that kind of film, and then he wants to do this shift into the blaxploitation era, because why? He's tired of getting this criticism in the black community about, you're not producing anything for us. So then he teams up with his pal Bill Cosby, and that's how we get Uptown Saturday Night, Let's Do It Again. And those are the same characters in those two films. But then we deal with a film,
and that's where we get Biggie Smalls as a name that becomes famous later on, and all that. So yeah.
Exactly. But then we deal with a piece of the action, which, if you watch it carefully, and by the way, they're not their two characters in those two films. They're different characters in a piece of the action. That film is about post-civil rights movement contradictions, because they're teaching this black inner city class who doesn't want to hear that anymore. Right. And literally, you have a very young Shirley Ralph. I think one of the characters, one of the teachers, would call her sister, and she goes, "I ain't your sister." And see, I remember hearing that in the early 70s. Growing up, I remember hearing people disavow being called brother and sister. I remember that. And I was dealing with a lot of those contradictions of, okay, now we have to remain in the black community without revolution, without radical change. And now we've got to directly deal with these contradictions. So a piece of the action plays at that. It's a comedy, but it plays at that a little bit. So Poitier is struggling to try to put this kind of social context content. And, it's up to the individual viewer, I guess, to decide whether that is important. Now, I have two more things, and I have 10 minutes left, and so that's perfect.
It's cool. Yeah.
Let's talk about the Oprah thing. So,
oh my God! Can I play the clip? Can I play that little clip?
Play it.
Because this kind of gets more than anything to my issues here.
Yeah, play it.
Let me play this here.
I'm having such a good time, and I'm not knowing I'm fucking up. I mean, I'm drinking, I'm doing every fucking thing you could possibly imagine. And then I get a call, and on the other end of the phone says, "Hi, Jamie Foxx." Who's this? Who's Oprah?
Uh-oh.
You're blowing it in the box.
Oh, really?
I
What
said,
a nice
"What?
thing for her to
You're
do.
blowing it." I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "All of this gallivanting and all this kind of shit, that's not what you want to do." So I want to take you somewhere. So make you understand the significance of what you're doing. Flash forward to now, Oprah Winfrey tells me you're fucking up. We go to Quincy Jones' house. He says, "Hey, man, listen, man, you're doing good, man. We just don't want you to blow it, baby." So we go in the house, and there's all these old actors, black actors from the 60s and the 70s who look like they just want to say good luck. They want to say, don't blow it.
Wow.
And I was
I
like,
mean, it's almost like an intervention.
yeah. Because you know me, I was going hard. I'm not playing. And then Oprah says, "Okay, you want to meet who you're supposed to meet here?" I said, "Yeah." He's right there. And it was Sidney Poitier.
I was going to say, I bet you they
Oh
brought
my
out Sidney
God.
Poitier.
Standing in a tuxedo.
Wow.
Like the
go up to
classiest
Sidney
guy ever.
Yeah, he says, I said, "Hello, Mr. Poitier. I saw you one time. You were at a party. Do you remember that?" Oh, yeah, I'm well enough. He says, "I want to give you one thing. I want to give you responsibility. When I saw your performance, it made me grow 2 inches." I was like, so I break down. Everybody sits me down. It was actually Sidney Poitier's birthday.
Wow.
They made me understand the significance of it,
Like the history of it.
because they said Sidney did it, and it was a character that we could. It was groundbreaking, and it was a character that we could all embrace. Ray Charles is also a character that we can embrace. You know, sometimes in the Oscars, the characters that they award, sometimes they're a little fractured.
This is bigger than you.
Yeah, it's way bigger.
All right.
Talk to me, Dr. Ball. Let me hear your reaction.
Well, I mean, you know, that's the whole thing. Like to me, I hear that, and I'm saying, okay, this is the black bourgeoisie, the intelligentsia, you know, saying, you know, couching individual black success as something good for the group, and I think what they mean more is for good for that group of black entertainers who want to be at that level. But and again, it's that same kind of what is it, respectability politics, and don't make too much noise and do this properly, don't upset the sponsors, you know, all of that kind of stuff, as if, again, black people are oppressed because black people are not sophisticated and civilized enough or bougie enough, as if that's the reason for the inequality and the mistreatment, and that's what. So it just always bothers me, and then the idea that Oprah is involved in managing any public presentation or performance of blackness or politics is just a problem. It's just a major problem. So you know, in fact, she figures in the conversation I'm going to have a little bit later on, but this whole entrepreneurial ethic that she wants to promote involves a lot of, we have to be able to present ourselves in a way that will capture white attention, white money, white sponsorship, white audience. And that is the sort of extent of the black struggle, you know. To the point you were making, we have to, I'm sorry, and I'll stop here, but the point you were making that so how did you put it? We have to stop, we have to abandon the struggle and just accept that we're going to be in this position. That's, we can't say brother and sister anymore. We just, the parameters of our struggle is trying to become middle class.
Oprah has been very consistent in her 60-something years on Earth. Oprah, you know, said, you know, in one of the books I read about her, she said, you know, everybody was protesting at the time. I wasn't trying to protest. I was trying to have a career.
Mm-hmm.
And so while everybody was protesting and being radical, she was becoming the first generation of television anchor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And later on reporter. Now, to show you how this respectability thing is consistent, and again, you can view this in more than one way. You can also view this as that they care about racial images so much that they want to control it. So there is that other side. But she even said, as a reporter, if there was like a fire or something, right, and she was going to interview somebody black who was, you know, involved in it or whatever, that she would literally wait for that woman to go upstairs and put on her makeup. She would tell them, go upstairs, put on your makeup, look nice, and then come back down, and then I'll interview you. Now that's Oprah in her 20s, right? being a television reporter, having as her hero Mary Tyler Moore, which links back to Betty White, right? So this respectability thing has been very consistent with her. So in our final 6 minutes, I want to get to the last thing.
Don't rush. I'll get to we'll start the other one when I.
Dr. Ball, I can't, when you're ready to throw that Monier at crypto, I got to get out the way. I respect it.
Oh boy.
But I just want to say this final thing about Sidney Poitier. So Sidney Poitier takes all of this Black radicalism again and infuses it in a play he's in the late 50s that becomes 2-3 years later a movie. Now, what am I talking about? I'm talking about the play and the movie A Raisin in the Sun, written by Lorraine Hansberry. Lorraine Hansberry, who was the secretary for Freedom newspaper, founded by Paul Robeson. So again, Hansberry understands all of this stuff about what's going on. And she writes a play that, if I can do a little John Henry Clark impersonation, has been terribly, badly characterized. Like it's been terribly described, and it needs to be reassessed. We need to do a reassessment of Lorraine Hansberry's play. Because what is that play about? That play is about the past, the present, and the future of African Americans. What's the theme of the play? Reparations. There's a dead father who haunts that play, and the money that he's left that is viewed as reparations, right? And the money is lost. So then you have the phantom father and the phantom money, right? That hovers over this family's decision of what to do. You have the conservative part of the family, the matriarch, right? You have the radical part of the family, the daughter, Bethia, right? Who, as the play ends, maybe or maybe not is going to be engaged to an African and go live in Africa, right? And that character, by the way, is the literary critics say is based on Lorraine Hansberry. And then you have that third generation, the little boy, right? And then you even have the fourth generation, if you want to call it that, because Ruby Dee's character is pregnant, right? So when Sidney Poitier, who, by the way, does this whole scene where, where they do their kind of homage to Africa or whatever, where they pretend and they, get on the table and they start singing and all that. But that's a whole thing of like, Lorraine Hansberry is trying to let you know this African revolution is coming. I don't know if you know, but it's coming. The whole film is about the civil rights movement is coming. The African liberation movement is coming, right? We don't talk about this play in this way, which is why it's so badly mischaracterized, right? So when the matriarch says, Willie Lee, you go tell that white man what 7 generations of this family has come to. And then he then goes and says, look, we're going to move into our house because my father earned it brick by brick. What is he doing in that scene? He's calling in that ancestor. He's calling in that father to strengthen them as they go and deal with the white supremacy they're about to go and deal with. Right? So this play very clearly articulates where we've been, where we are, and where we're going to go. She articulates we're going to go into radical struggles, right? And that's why this play, people think this play is about housing or whatever, or integration. I'm like, no. And Baraka even talked about how wrong he was. Because he was one of the first people to jump all up and down on this play. And he later on said, no, I was completely wrong. That play was about our survival. Right, and Brian C. in an anti-Black world. That play is about our survival. Where are we going to live? How we're going to live. See? So I just want to say that Poitier knows a lot and infuses his job, whether we appreciate it or not, whether we harshly critique it or not, his job is to infuse that kind of presence, that kind of African presence, Black American presence, Caribbean presence in his portrayals. And I think, if we're going to thank Sidney Poitier and remember Sidney Poitier, we need to remember that. And we need to see him that way, I think.
Right on. And again, my thing for whatever criticism I have of the role he was forced to play is that it was the role he was forced to play. That the context and the conditions in which he had to grow and emerge and learn and perform put limits. And that's what I tend to want to prefer to focus on. So if we want him historically to have done more, we have to have we have to judge that in relationship to the broader political struggle around him. And I would say the same for artists and celebrities today, that if we want them to behave in a certain way, we have to create the movement that makes their behavior that demands a certain behavior and performance, as opposed to expecting them to lead the way. So I appreciate you walking with us through some of this morning, and I definitely want us to do more. And we definitely have to have you come back to do the Gil Noble special, and much more, even on comics and all that other stuff. And of course, we eagerly await your work on Mumia. So,
and never ever watch the Diddy Felicia Rashad.
I was going to say, I had all these jokes lined up. Well, Diddy saved the play, I'm sure. So
don't ever watch that.
All right. So listen, everybody. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks to you, Dr. Todd Stephen Burrows, and definitely people check out his work at drumsindtheglobalvillage.com, as well as all the great contributions he's made to our mixwhatilike.org. We're going to step off of this stream and go to the other one. So please do join us over there for this discussion of Bitcoin and Black America. And if we missed anything this morning, I go back all the time. I know my colleagues do as well. So please, as Pierre at Comedy Hype says,
put it in the comments.
And we'll catch you next time here at I Mix What I Like. Peace, because we know you're willing to fight for it, like Fred used to say. Thanks, Todd. Peace. Catch you next time, everybody. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. What I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.